And we are live. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this slightly cold, wet, damp October morning for today's Job Train How Talent session. Normally on Wednesdays, but a special edition on this Tuesday morning with Bridge of Hope Careers. Before we get started for this session, just wanted to check that everybody can see and hear us, me, okay. For those of us that are joining on Crowdcast, if you could just pop something in the chat, that would be amazing. And welcome to everybody that's joining us on LinkedIn Live as well. Good morning to you. So before we get cracking, just a little bit of housekeeping. Dead straightforward. This session is very much for all of you, our guests. And with that in mind, please do feel free to ask any questions you want. There is a questions area, or feel free to ask questions in the chat. We are also, if you look at Crowdcast, look at the right-hand menu bar, and there is a polls area, and we're running a poll. Probably might run a couple during this session, but the first one is really asking about how receptive your organisation is to inclusive hiring, because that is the topic of today's conversation. So feel free to get stuck in, join that poll. We might discuss some of the results and things as we go. But without any further ado, maybe we'll get started with some introductions. I'm Giles. I am a director here at JobTrain. We're an applicant tracking software provider, but we do lots of other different things apart from just delivering and supporting software for a lot of customers. We produce quite a lot of market reports, white papers, and we run these webinars as well. So quite a lot of the time, the topics of discussion aren't necessarily connected with recruitment technology. We like to branch out, we like to diversify a little bit. And going back quite a few years now, I first met James and Chance at an IHR event, and it was really, really inspiring there. Their story really struck me, and they were kind enough to join us probably maybe 2 years ago on a previous session. So James and Chance are returners, and we wanted to run this session for you this morning all about inclusive hiring. So before we get stuck into the meat of this conversation, I thought maybe we'd just start with some intros. And maybe, James, we start with you, because you were one of those people, and there's a lot of chat about it. You're one of those people that was born lucky in life, but then that luck ran out, didn't it?
Just a bit. Yeah. I think
that.
the understatement really of the century. I was born more than lucky. I was born exceptionally lucky. I tried to do the odds, and it was like I got to several million to one. To give you an idea of the kind of privilege that I had as a child, I was sent away to the world's most famous boarding school, age 13. That one. And I was in the same class as a boy called Cameron, believe it or not, the one who went on to run the country, 3 years below a buffoon called Johnson, who ran the country into the ground. So you kind of get the level of silver spoons that I had in my mouth.
And buffoonery.
And buffoonery.
Yeah.
I stayed well away from the buffoonery, to be honest, that buffoonery. So I went into the corporate world, and I spent 2.5 decades mainly in the drinks business, which I loved. Everything was great. And worked for the likes of Guinness and Diageo and large international drinks organizations. Everything was fantastic, really. My luck continued, my extreme luck, the whole way through until about 2002. I got posted off to America, which was fantastic. And by 2008, I was running most of the biggest customers for Diageo, one of the biggest drinks companies in the world. Happily married, had a big swimming pool, and a mansion. I checked every box, basically. It's like living the dream. What could possibly go wrong? And you probably gathered by the fact that ultimately I set up a social enterprise. Really quite a lot went wrong. Pretty well, in fact, pretty well anything. And my luck deserted me. And over the next 5 or 6 years, any that could go wrong did go wrong. I was told I wasn't allowed to swear, so I won't say that.
Nope.
And it involved multiple redundancies, but also I got swindled a couple of times. I got sued, and it was all hideous. And I ended up being sent to a psychiatric ward just outside New York. I'll spare you those gory details, but came back to the UK to recover. And that's when I was diagnosed by 2 different doctors, both of whom said, yeah, you've definitely got bipolar. And which I kind of initially was like, well, I don't know what it is. Then I denied it. Then I slowly accepted. And now actually I embrace it as my superpower. But life started to unravel pretty spectacularly. And then the next 4 weeks, my entire Maslow's pyramid just disintegrated, unfortunately. So my marriage went, my kids went, still waiting for them to come back, hopefully. My corporate career definitely went, and I lost all material wealth. So the whole lot, apart from a suitcase, which was all a bit rubbish. But I had to try and still put some food on the table if I could. And I wasn't allowed to do anything involving sitting behind a desk. So I tried to get a job, and nobody would give me one. And for the first time, having been white male and really privileged, I experienced barriers to employment. What do I mean by that? Nobody would give me a job for love or money. I ended up being a janitor for about a year, clawed my way back from that, got back into the corporate career, and then I was laid off one more time, and that was 2018. And that's when I had a bit of an epiphany moment, sitting on a church wall in North London, and somebody gave me a good old shaking from above and said, "Mate, look, I didn't put you here to get people drunk. Do something with your life, do something meaningful." And the only thing I could think of meaningful, really, from first-hand experience, was a job and helping people get jobs. Because I think everybody here knows the power of a job, what it does for you, your family, your finances, your self-worth. So I thought, I'm going to try and help people way less fortunate than myself get jobs. So that's the backstory to Bridge of Hope before we talk about how it works.
I love it. And Chance, your experience was the exact opposite and flip of that, wasn't it? Tell me about that.
Absolutely. Unlike James, I didn't have any silver spoons. I didn't have a Cameron or a Boris. I had an influence of a guy called Spider, and that was about it for me in my school. Unfortunately, I was born very unlucky. In fact, I was born so unlucky. I was born into a family. My dad simply didn't think I was his. And so I experienced huge amounts of physical abuse as a child, first being before I was 1 year old. And that left me with what I thought were birthmarks until I was 21. And Mum told me on my 21st birthday what really happened and what those marks were. So I didn't feel significant at home growing up. I ran away a lot. And I met some friends, and they made me feel good. They made me feel significant and loved, in fact. But the byproduct of that was they were from the antisocial membership. And it was only going to be a matter of time before I got into trouble, and I did. So by the time I was 16, I ended up in prison. By the time I was 18, my sister took me to a mental hospital because the childhood trauma and depression had seriously started to show and take its toll on me. And I tried to make changes in my life, not too much success. And fast forward, as if it couldn't get any worse, my sister, who was my absolute rock, my only rock at times, she died. She died young of cancer. And I didn't want to talk about it because then that would make it real, which is the worst thing you could do, because within a year, my life completely fell apart, completely unraveled. And I ended up back inside one last time. But this time I asked myself this question. I said, do you like who you are? And the answer was a solid no. In fact, I thought if this was going to be my existence for my future, I didn't see the point in having a life. And so I just wanted to end it all. And I'll never forget the day I just had enough. And I was left these choices, literally, to either jump off a cliff or change. And so I threw everything and the kitchen sink and the neighbor's kitchen sink at change, thankfully, and spent 3 years and 10 months almost every day in therapy to unlock some pain and to deal with that childhood trauma, while spending 5 years studying with the Open University, determined to give myself an education my childhood did not afford unto me, and done swaves of personal development programs. And then this incredible day that I'll never forget came upon me. With all that work, I was just filled with ebullience, and the warm tears of joy came flooding uncontrollably down my face. And it was because for the first time in my entire life, I felt freedom. No more emotional discombobulation, no more anger. I was filled with forgiveness and topped to the brim with self-respect. And I realized two things had happened to me on that very day. One, my childhood experiences were no longer going to define my future. And two, I'd finally become the person I was always meant to be. And that was the day I decided whatever work I'm doing, it must be about changing lives, nourishing communities and making a real difference. And I continued, and I've done just that. I was introduced to James here through some of the charities we work with. We work with 105 of them. And we became friends for about a year and a half. Actually, you should know we are.
What happened after that?
We are still
went horribly wrong.
And James kept saying to me, come on over to Bridge of Hope, have a look at what we're doing. I was really busy setting up these community groups and things like this, so I didn't come straight away. But when I did, my God, and had a look, it was like, for me, an invitation to heaven. And I'll tell you why. I was successfully transforming the lives of young men who'd come into contact with the criminal justice system, because I have the blueprint for that change and do that well. I came into Bridge of Hope, I had a look, and now I could help everyone. Veterans, people with neurodivergence like myself, people with different abilities. I prefer the term than disabilities, and women returners, LGBT, the whole lot. And I thought, this is where I want to live, because for once I could see a pathway where system impacted candidates could walk towards employers who were looking for them. And I thought this was absolutely magical. And James and I, we certainly wanted it to make it more than magical. We wanted the candidate journey itself to be supportive, and we can tell you a little bit more about that along the journey today.
Thank you both very much. I've heard your story individually several times now, and it's still, it really touches me. But with that in mind, I think when a lot of us think about inclusive hiring, you think about the practices we put in place to make sure there aren't barriers to people that are applying for our jobs. But that's some way down the funnel in terms of inclusive hiring, really, isn't it? And your passion project is very much about helping employers to identify and understand that there's a huge untapped talent pool, and also to reach that untapped talent pool. So do you want to, I don't know whether it's Chance or James, do you want to talk to us a little bit more about that and how you help to uncover people that from their perspective, they just think that employment is something that is well beyond their bounds, well beyond their reach, and also the benefits of different groups of people too, that may have different experiences, may have had different challenges, but the benefits that they can bring to an organization.
Yeah, I thought we'll both have a crack at answering, I'm sure.
Right.
Well, I'll just talk about the kind of the logic flow that originally came to how we looked at, went to find these candidates, really, as you say, who are typically untapped talent. So it was right after that epiphany moment of like, okay, I'm going to try and help people less fortunate myself. It was all nice, well and good, but how the heck are you going to do that? I didn't really know how. But one thing I did know was I didn't know what I was talking about, and I wasn't an expert in this field, and I couldn't do it by myself. So there were 3 or 4 things that made me think, okay, well, who are the experts? And what do they do? And the experts, to me, and I totally agree, are typically charities. A lot of these charities worked with different groups. Many of them would focus on a particular group, or we'd call them an untapped talent pool. So they might be refugees, they might be neurodiverse, ex-offenders, etc., etc. So pick your poison. So my logic to start with was to say, well, I'm going to ring up, a couple of charities from each of these different groups and speak to them and find out, what do they do to get their clients, back on their feet, and then what do they do to get them into work. And I rang up 44 charities, CEOs of charities, and asked them basically those 2 questions. And all 44 had a phenomenal answer to the first question. They had a really good program about getting people ready, getting their confidence back, getting a roof above their head, getting them a bank account, all these fundamental, absolutely critical things that are going to help you on your journey back from whatever challenge you may have or fall you may have taken, whatever it might be. And then I said, okay, so that's great. You've got them back on their feet. What do you do to get them into work? And all 44 looked at me and went, we don't. And we don't do anything about that. That's not our problem, Governor, basically, was the answer. And it wasn't anybody's fault. It was, for me, it was a system failure, really. It was like, well, why the heck are they not taking into account the most important piece of the puzzle, which is the job bit, which, certainly I'd had firsthand experience of, what it can do to you, how it can shred your family, but also how, incredibly helpful, or important it can be to have a job. So there was a kind of big missing there. And at the same time, there was also talking 6 years ago, there was a big skills shortage. So, recurring themes here. And organizations wanted to be more diverse, wanted to be more inclusive, but didn't know where to find people. And so that was the logic of why don't we connect the dots, hence the Bridge of Hope. So Chance, do you want to pick up on the candidate piece a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, it's great. We have the candidates fed in through the charities and various other places, but they are system impacted. They do face barriers. We know people who are autistic have a 16%, maybe 20% chance of getting a job, and so just not getting through. So one of the things that we do is, for one, we know where to find them now. And we can cover that a little bit later on, because this is really quite important and special, because they've given up on Reed, LinkedIn, Monster, all this stuff. They just have given up because it's not working for them. But one of the things that we do that really is attractive, thoughtful, and brought about by points of empathy is think about what it's like to be in the shoes of a system impacted person. That really helps to attract people as well. So understanding that, if you're the one that actually did get through, landed that job, and you're the only one in that family, we understand everyone's banking their hopes in that one person. And so we really do think about how can we provide tools that one person can turn around and support family members with. And we try to do things like this. So, just as a quick example, candidates who, for instance, we know everyone would have banked their hopes in that one person. And it's really important to know that if you're the one in your family that's got a degree and you're the only one, or you're the only one in your family that's landed a job and you're the only one, everyone's banked their hopes in that one person. Anyone with financial troubles, talk to Chance, he'll sort you out. These are all real privileges to be in a position to support friends and family and stuff, but we know it's still a pressure on a candidate. And so we put these in place so a candidate can turn around and signpost professionals to their family members as well. And this really gives them a feeling that, okay, I'm on a platform where I don't feel alone in this struggle. I have some tools here that I can turn around and support family members with. So I think it's really, really important to think really broadly about this and deep, because it's not just giving someone a job. It really is about how does this transform the family dynamic? How does this ricochet out as a positive light in our communities?
Brilliant. That's really helpful. So in essence, Bridge of Hope, which you've established, is almost like a conduit, really. You connected, because if I was thinking about, just from the job training hat on here, and we wanted to completely embrace inclusive hiring and find and uncover people that may have had specific challenges and bring them in to work within our organization, I really wouldn't know where to start. So Bridge of Hope provides that portal, that conduit. You've done all the hard work in terms of connecting with all the charitable organizations, support groups and what have you that connect with these people. And then Bridge of Hope gives employers access to that. Is that about right?
Yeah, that sums it up. We're trying to be the conduit, whatever you want to call it. We're trying to help aggregate those candidates. So we work with the intermediaries, as we say. There could be charities, there could be social enterprises. We work with boot camps. We work with lots of sixth form colleges, non-RUS or unis. But we also work with a lot of people who self-refer. Through social media, they're going, hear about Bridge of Hope, and we're like, well, come on in. You're very welcome. The fact that your mum returned, bloody great. We've got lots of clients looking for you. If you've been in prison, even better. We've got a whole bunch of organizations, particularly in the construction space, looking for people like you. So we're trying to flip the model for that candidate. Pretty well every other site, all of these things are a barrier. They're a problem. They're either going to be not wanted by the recruiting manager, or the ATS system will put a barrier, etc. So we're trying to change that. So provide the channel, but also change that suddenly, actually these are really positive things rather than negatives, and then get the process to be changed further down the line. It's conduit is a very good word.
That's great. So that's really helpful in terms of understanding that there's a solution out there for finding people. I guess there sometimes might be a little bit of maybe fear or trepidation around hiring different groups, maybe the additional support that they might need. So I've got probably a question for you first, James, and then one for you, Chance. So James, you've been refreshingly open about your bipolar. Can you explain to everybody here a little bit about how neurodiversity can be embraced, but also some of the benefits of different groups as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I knew zero about mental health until suddenly it happened to me.
Yeah.
'Cause it was definitely something that happened to everybody else, not to me. But now I absolutely do embrace it, and there's no way I give it back. I would love to give some of the side effects effectively, you know, some of the collateral damage, but not the condition. Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's some great research around this. There's a very good primer from the CIPD called Neurodiversity at Work. And they kind of flip the model, and they're saying, look, forget about this stigma thing, you know, start thinking about these groups, and, you know, certainly organization, you know, people who are on parts of the spectrum, they can bring unbelievable talent to the table. And some of this is somewhat stereotypical, so it's not guaranteed, but there is some pretty strong evidence around it. You know, the obvious one is the autistic community. Chance mentioned that. So it is, it's 16%, I think it is 15-16% of adults with autism are in employment. I mean, that's just absolutely shocking. Now, some of them couldn't do a job because it's very, very extreme autism, but a huge amount of them could do a brilliant job. And now they can work from home. So a lot of those problems that, you know, that come with the challenge of working in an office environment are not applicable. And you start thinking about what really good autistic people are really good at. And we collaborate closely with the likes of Auticon, you know, and they're absolutely phenomenal at focused jobs, particular roles that require highly detailed, highly focused. I'd be absolutely terrible at these type of roles. So compliance, operations, whatever it makes, you know, those kind of things. Why the hell are you not looking for autistic people? Stop, you know, flip the model and say we should go and find them, because there are quite a few organizations who've woken up and realized that now. Microsoft do, several others in America do. You look at dyslexic, you know, Chance is dyslexic, and you know, incredibly creative. You've had to be, because you've had, you know, your entire childhood you've got a system that's designed to keep you out, you know, and you're, you know, you don't fit the educational mold. And, you know, we can look at all those phenomenal entrepreneurs who are all dyslexic, you know, etc. And then bipolar, you know, our speciality, unbelievably hopeless at detail, but we're big picture, and we connect dots and see opportunities everywhere. I mean, sometimes to a fault, you know. You know, there was quite an interesting article on the founding fathers of America, and written by a psychiatrist, who turned around and said all but one were guaranteed to be bipolar. You know, and the premise was like, you kind of have to be bipolar, you know, to want to leave your nice cozy farm in the Cotswolds or Suffolk or something and go to a barren land and think it was a good idea. But if you ask that to me, I'd be like, why would you not? Of course you'd do that. I mean, it would just be bonkers to stay here and, you know, hang out on a boring farm when you can go and create new stuff in America. So you kind of get the gist. So we feel passionate, not just about neurodiverse, but all these talent pools. They come with unbelievable attributes, these people, that, you know, some typical talent, as it were, doesn't have.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Go on.
Totally understand that, and totally convinced. As an employer, you might be concerned with, we've got some great potential here with neurodiverse talent, but when we employ them, bring them into our organizations, how can we make sure that they are settled, they perform, they're well looked after, catered for, and ultimately they stay within the organization? I'm going to challenge, I think, you, Chance, with that one, because actually you've been through this process yourself, and it's far more than just simply identifying people that have had specific challenges or disadvantages.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing that I would recommend is access to work. You know, get in contact with them, find out what's available and what support is there, because there's always great support that comes from that angle as well. We also run masterclasses on neurodiversity. So, you know, there's plenty of masterclasses out there, you know, I have to say, not just ours. But you know, what we found was creating a sort of a learn with empathy model to really take that trepidation out of play, and more of an understanding on how to manage and deal with people with neurodivergence. You know, so we play games in our masterclass. Games are designed to make you feel like what it might be like to have cognitive overload from ADHD, or feel like what it might be like to be dyslexic. So building in that level of empathy in your hiring managers and the likes is really, really important and helpful, you know. And being a dyslexic myself, I always use analogies and thinking color and 3D and all this type of thing. And so I would use the superhero analogy, and not everyone likes to be seen as a superhero or feel that, but I certainly do. And I always say to people, you know, imagine watching a superhero movie and everyone had the same superpower. Boring, right? It just be boring. The very, very reason they're able to take down the baddie is because they aggregate all their different superpowers to become a force to be reckoned with. And this is what our workplaces could look like, you know. So understanding the different neurodivergence is absolutely important to build your team of Avengers, if you like, you know. So I'm dyslexic. You might want to move me towards the marketing team. I think creatively, biz dev. I have that entrepreneurial mindset like your Richard Bransons and the likes out there. You know, people with autism, that pinpoint focus, software development might be for them. So it's understanding where to put place these different superpowers. And that's really going to make the difference. And not only will it make the difference, it will allow that individual to go on a pathway where they will thrive and be more comfortable, and by playing at their strengths. So this is absolutely important. And we're always happy to discuss this. We have experts in our corners that can talk about this and the best ways of supporting people. But please, everyone, lose the trepidation. You are missing out on some incredible superheroes, and we're happy to tell you where the superpower is and where it's best placed.
I love it. So thinking on a little bit, sometimes ex-forces personnel can really experience a challenge when they leave the armed forces. They've gone from an incredibly structured and rigid environment in life to suddenly all of that falling away, which leaves a lot of uncertainty and a bit of a vacuum. So I imagine they probably need a particular approach, and also ex-offenders, which thankfully is something that is being championed by the likes of Timpson's, for example. But Chance, could you speak from your own experience? Because again, there might be more nervousness about engaging with and bringing ex-offenders into an organisation, making sure that they're supported in the best way. You know, what are the risks associated with it, but also what are the benefits too?
Well, ex-offenders and veterans, unfortunately, face similar barriers. People have these preconceptions that with the PTSD, you know, if a laptop drops in the workplace, is this person going to be triggered, etc. Yeah. And they have sort of similar worries about and prisoners. But one of the things is the trust bit that some people might not be able to get over. And I can say a few things, in fact. I mentor a lot of young men. I go into prisons and support and help them. And when I sit them around in a circle and I say, right, guys, let's do a little bit of an icebreaker. Tell me your dream job. And not one of them says drug dealer or burglar or whatever it is. You know, they say, I'd like to be a designer, engineer, you know, all these great industries. So we know this is not their dream, you know. And the second thing is we ran a project in our early days when we were a charity called Project Venture. And this would help returning citizens from prison to set their own businesses up. And in that 4 years, not one person returned to prison, not one. We know 80% of small businesses fell, so not all of them were successful. What happened was they transformed their lives, built a new network, and that's the game changer. That's what changed their lives. Timpson's was asked the question as well, what's the, let's address the elephant in the room, if you like. What about trust? Have you had any sort of theft or anything? And he said, yes, basically, absolutely, we have had theft, but it's never been from the group that has come from prison. And this is something that blows people's minds. It's just never been from that group. And a lot of people don't realize system impacted people, particularly those who come into contact with criminal justice system, they just want a life. They want a job. And once you give them that job, they turn their lives around. Anything outside of that, a lot of the time has been due to just trying to survive. And it was Aristotle who said it. Poverty is the mother of crime.
Well put, very well put. So we're going to take a slight break there and look at the polls, actually, which is great. We've got a few responses, so thank you for those that responded. So the great news is, and it probably doesn't surprise me because of the session we were running, but the overall stats around, in terms of the organisation being receptive to inclusive hiring is actually really, really positive. None for not receptive. A few slightly, but very receptive, and it's a priority for all. Is really, really high, which is fantastic. On the second poll around ESG, so yeah, it's getting there. We've got 4 people who are saying it's a priority, but nobody's saying that it's mission critical, which is interesting. So clearly some work to do there for sure. And with that in mind, maybe some people just simply don't have the confidence, or they're not yet seeing the benefits, especially around social. So James, maybe you could talk us through some examples of particular employers that have done a really, really great job when they've had a focus on social and inclusive recruitment strategies as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're lucky enough to see quite a few, and we've already talked about Timson, so we're not going to keep going on about them, but they were really clearly very, very good. I'm going to actually talk about 2, one of which is an organization, one of our largest clients, called Molson Coors. So they're a global beer company, and they've really got after this in a big way, so much so that they do open hiring, and they've thrown out the CV for a large proportion of their jobs, particularly early careers, or clearly they can't throw it out for exec roles, etc., etc. But so they've been pretty brave, and they moved to more of an assessment program, and that's worked incredibly well. It's all about what you can bring to the table going forward, rather than what you've done in the past or what O levels you've got and all that kind of stuff. But the one actually I think I might just mention that you probably won't have heard of, but I really like their. They've got a really impressive case study. It's a recycling company. They're up near where you are, Giles, a bit further north, I think, Preston. And so when I was setting up Bridge of Hope 6 years ago, somebody said, "Oh, you got to go and see these guys." And I'm like, I'd never heard of them. They're called Recycling Lives. But I was going up to Liverpool because we launched at Aintree Racecourse, and I'm like, well, I'm going to be in the area. I'll go and see these guys. So I went to see them, and they just basically do what it says on the tin: recycling TVs and fridges. Nothing very startling. And I said to them, "Look, why have I been told to come and see you? Because I've been told you're best in class," kind of thing. And anyway, they were quite shy, but they did admit that, the recycling had worked really well. They'd expanded throughout the UK. And on the back of that, they thought they ought to kind of give back a little bit. And I said, "Well, what did you do?" And he said, "Well, we created a foundation." And I said, "Well, what was the foundation to do?" And he was like, "Well, good question. We didn't really know." But anyway, so they kind of made it up on the fly, but they decided to help people in Preston who've fallen off, on harder times. And ultimately give them an opportunity to get back on their feet, do all the bit we talked about with the other charities we're doing, but also the bit about, and by the way, there's a job at the end of it, either with us or you can go and get somewhere else, no problem. And I'm like, okay, this is fantastic. So what are the big benefits to your organization from this? And he said, untold. He said, it's completely transformed our organizations. He said, but the 3 big ones, he said, in third place, the third biggest was productivity. He said, the people who we brought in, they worked way harder than the people who were there in the first place. So he said, not only did they work harder, but then everybody else had to work harder to keep up because they didn't want to be shown up by these really, really hard-working people. He said, so our productivity went through the roof. I'm like, okay, that's only third. He goes, yep, that's only third. I'm like, all right, well, what's second? He goes, retention. He said, we don't have that word anymore in our business because nobody leaves. He said, it's been like a glue. He said, by the fact bringing people in from these challenging backgrounds, homeless, ex-offenders, et cetera, has just shown that we really care, and as a culture, and it's kind of glued everything together. So people, frankly, just don't leave. And I'm like, okay, well, wow, brilliant. But that's 2. What was the third? And he goes, he said, well, I said, what's the best? He goes, well, I'm a bit embarrassed to tell you that. And I said, well, come on, nobody's listening. What is it? And he said, well, we pretty well win every pitch we get. And I said, you do what? He goes, we win every tender. And I said, well, how the hell do you do that? And he said, well, we're doing recycling. So if we're going to do it in Peterborough or something, we're pitching. And the other guys will pitch, it's going to cost X £1,000 per ton. And somebody will say, well, we can do it for £10 a ton cheaper. And the other guy, £20 a ton. We just come in and say, hey, do 100 tons and you put 10 homeless people into work. Do 150 and you put 20 people into work. I'm like, that's absolutely genius. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what's your pricing? He goes, oh, we're a lot more expensive than everybody else as well. But I loved it, and I'm a commercial guy. I'm a corporate guy playing in the sort of social world. And this is the genius for me is you can actually make a huge difference and commercially win at the same time. What's not to like about that, And so, that's become part of our mantra. We do with all of our clients is we help them win bids. We're like, just get us on the case. And so we work with them. We'll help them craft the bid. We'll help them pitch the bid. Chance was doing one literally yesterday in a big pitch. And this is kind of slightly part of the protocol is we want to be your partner to help you win that business, to help you drive the inclusive hiring rather than we're not just a job board, as it were. But anyway, you get the gist. There's some phenomenal commercial benefits to this, and we'll touch on social value in a moment because that's another big one.
Yeah. So, I mean, the benefits are so obvious, especially when you explain them so well. How does an organization just get started with okay, we can see all the benefits here. We can see the future. How do we get started in terms of implementing an inclusive hiring strategy? Where to go for help? What to even think about? What to put in place?
Do you want to answer, Chance?
I mean, when you say where to go for help, I'm obviously going to say Bridge of Hope, right? But I think it's important to sort of get things in place to have a look at your pathways, okay. First and foremost, because you want these candidates to come in, but there'll be blockers there and things that you just won't normally see. We run an advisory, we will have a look and create a whole sort of inclusive hiring roadmap for you. We'll find those barriers, reduce them, and we'll even have sort of people come in and apply for those jobs from different talent pools to show the different system impacted candidates what blocks them, and come back with some real pragmatic answers. And a lot of the things, you wouldn't believe it, won't cost you a penny to change, but make a huge difference. So one of the things is actually clear the pathway first so that candidates can come through. We can help with that, and there are other organizations that can support with that. I'd advise people to clear that pathway first, and that will really make a huge difference. Do you want to tip in, James?
Yeah, and I think the starting point, even before you get to that, is if you found this useful today, get us in to do a talk to your exec. We don't charge any money. We'll do a lunch and learn. We'll do to your exec, to your hiring team, whoever it might be. But and we won't be pitching Bridge of Hope. We'll be talking about why inclusive hiring makes sense. So we want to be with you, by your side, helping this happen. And so obviously we would love you to partner with us, but we're not forcing anything. We don't but the idea of our partnership is, as I mentioned, is not a job board. It is literally trying to be your inclusive hiring organization go-to guys. We have best part of 79,000 live candidates right now, and our core offering is unlimited. So you can put all of your jobs on our posting on our site. You can come and look at our candidates, nearly 80,000, and you can hire as many as you'd like. And all of that is for the price of a couple of hires versus an agency. So we try to make it as feasible as possible, and from a budget point of view. But ultimately, we want to help you move the needle in your organization, because that's our mission. Yes, we're a social enterprise. Yes, we need to make some money, but really, we want to change the whole mentality around hiring to make inclusive hiring the norm.
That's brilliant. I mean, I think as ever with a new initiative like this or a new strategy, is you've got to get exec buy-in. And if you're both offering your time to help achieve that and unlock that, then that is superb. Huge fan of lunch and learns. We run them very regularly within job training, all manner of different subjects. So, and it's always nice to get some external input as well. I know your contact details are in here anyway. So if anybody wants to get in touch and start talking about lunch and learn and what have you, I believe that there are I'm going to continue this conversation, but there are some discounts available as well by virtue of the association with Job Train. So thank you very much for that.
20%.
You mentioned something before we got on to this bit about how to start implementing an inclusive hiring strategy, something I think you would go back to your chance, and it's completely slipped my mind. So yeah, a complete pro here.
Would it help just mention the social value bit, because that was the
that's it. Thank you.
There you go.
See you in a moment.
So the reason why we suggested having this as a poll was, probably this time a year ago, we were, focused around being inclusive hiring partners. And we were a tiny social enterprise. We were growing like a weed. We had all these amazing blue chip clients. We've got 50 or 60 household name companies out there. All seem complete kumbaya. What could possibly go wrong? But judging by my last 10 years, quite a lot. And luckily, so the reality was we needed to get funding. We were really keen to get some funding from sort of financial organizations, but none of them would touch us. We didn't have 5 years worth of profits, all that kind of good stuff. So fortunately, we've found an organization called Engaged Talent, and they own about 23 recruitment agencies out there. They love what we do. We love what they did. And we said, look, we're Switzerland. We want to work with everybody. They said, absolutely. And we've become part of that. So they've really helped turbocharge our organization. They've helped give us stability, sustainability, and allowed us to do what we need to do. But they also helped us realize there was a big opportunity around social value. I was asked by the CEO, and the CEO, he's a bit like Ray Winston, this guy. He doesn't mess around. And so he was sort of saying, so what exactly do you do? And I said, well, we're an inclusive talent portal or partner, whichever way you want to look at it.
And he goes, no, you're not. You're more like social value on steroids, aren't you?
And so I'm like, okay, where are you going with this, Tim? He goes, well, he said, I'm getting nothing but jip from our private equity backers about ESG and the social value, particularly. And he said, and we're getting, and they're getting grief from the pension companies who own it. So, this ESG is a big deal. And we're pretty good at the E, and the governance not bad at. But he said, the S, we're hopeless at. How can you help? And I said, well, look, each person you put into work from the Bridge of Hope is typically worth £20,000 in social value. What does that mean? Basically, the value to society of taking somebody from being on benefits and all the other stuff that comes around it, the rubbish that comes around it, to being in work, paying tax, even if it's a basic job, is £20,000. Now, if they've been in prison, you can treble that. So this is an enormous amount of value, social value. And so he goes, all right, how does that compare to we did a day's volunteering as an organization? I said, it doesn't. That's less than £1,000. It just makes you feel good. It doesn't change anything. It just, it's lipstick on a pig. And then we looked at a bunch of other things, and nothing got close to inclusive hiring. So his point was, look, why the hell are you not telling everybody about that? Why are you not promoting social value? You are a way to spike social value. So literally, we kind of took that on board. 2 days later, we were the head of KPMG, one of our big clients, and the guy who ran ESG globally, and he was very upfront. He said, look, all our clients kind of get E, and we have the solutions. And he said, all of them get the G, and they have to do it, otherwise they end up in prison, like our CEO. But he said, the S, they haven't a clue, and we really lack some solutions. So off the back of that, we're really kind of leaning into this. And this is, some of the audience may be kind of going, yeah, we're having this problem around ESG or around social value. The quickest way to drive it is social value. And so we've come up with a whole bunch of sort of programs, and we won't go through that now. But two of them that spring to mind, one of which is if you want to really go deep in a location, we can help you there. So you want to drive social value in a particular geography, and we'll work with the referral partners, the employers, all the key stakeholders in that area, pull together. We have a dedicated talent pool. We can go and find more candidates, top it up, all that kind of good stuff. And also we're doing a similar thing for your supply chain. If you wanted to diversify your supply chain, we have a program there as well. But the critical thing from just a 101 here is, I can guarantee pretty well everybody on the call, their boss or their boss's boss, certainly whoever's at the top of that company, will be getting jip about ESG, and will be particularly around the S, because they won't know what to do. And being able to go back and say, here is a way of being able to make our S go from a problem area for us to where we can lead into, and we're really, taking a leadership role, is a huge upside around inclusive hiring.
That's brilliant and really impactful. And you simply just don't think of it in those terms of, bringing somebody into your organisation can actually save £20,000, and never mind an ex-offender. You just simply don't consider the cost to the state, if you like, of having somebody incarcerated.
Well, it's not even save; it's more generating social value rather than saving money, which is it's a positive and one you can claim as an organisation.
Yeah, and if they've been in the care system, you can add £15,000 of social value on whichever one of those candidates we're talking about. It's a huge saving.
That's really impactful. Really impactful. I mean, there's just so much to take on board, but just benefits right the way across the spectrum. And it's just like, why wouldn't somebody commit their time, their resource to implement an inclusive hiring strategy? So, I mean, this morning's session has been fantastic.
Thank you.
Any final
questions
points
from the
or
audience?
words from either of you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to just talk about the mindset, changing that whole mindset about, hi, this is not an altruistic move. This is looking at people who have what we know to be the predictors of success. Grit being number one predictor of success, emotional intelligence, the ability to improvise, particularly in tough situations. So people who are system impacted have this in spades, and it's absolute. There's lots of evidence to go to back that up. And so what I ask people to look at is to look at these candidates as diamonds in the rough, who will only need a little polish and they'll spark like any other diamond. But it's pressure that has made the diamond as we know it so special. And it's pressure that has made our system impacted candidates as resilient as they are. And we must stop going into that jewelry shop and buying those diamonds because the jeweler's got a lovely smile on their face and the diamonds are all sparkly, because some of them are zirconias and cubic stones. We know this because ChatGPT wrote the CV or Mum wrote the CV. Just look for these diamonds in the rough, because when you bring them in, they are loyal, they work hard, as James mentioned. All the evidence is there to back that up, and they can only do well for your organization and inspire some of your existing staff.
Beautifully put. Yeah, I love that.
Beautifully put. And I always learned one thing about these kind of things is never follow up from chance at the end, because it's always going to be completely lame. So,
I'd love to share something about what my son said, just so that people can have a real deeper sort of feeling for social mobility. So my son, throughout my life, you've heard my story, throughout my life, my son's always said to me, whether I was good or bad, he's always said, "Dad, I love you." And it's always wonderful to hear that from him. But one day, with all the changes that I made in my life, he came up to me and he said, "Dad, I love who you are." And that moved me. It moved me to tears, in fact. It made me start to think about all the other families from disadvantaged backgrounds. I thought, of course, the children love them, but do they love who they are? Because it's when they love who they are, that's when inspiration strikes in the household and ricochets out as a positive light in our communities. And I can tell you this is fact because my son now said, "Dad, I want to do what you do. I want to help people." And he's just landed himself a role as a teacher's assistant and has taken on some projects like that. So this is very real. So I urge you all to really consider system impacted people, because it's not just about employing them. It's about how will this inspire the people behind them.
That is beautiful. Incredibly inspiring, and probably the perfect way to finish what has been an incredible conversation. There's so much to learn, so much to unpack. For those that are here or those that haven't been able to watch live, we will write up a post on the back of this. Reach through the chat, do make contact with James and Chance. They're incredibly inspiring people. They're only too happy to help, and they're even offering their time for free in the form of a lunch and learn session with execs and that kind of stuff to help get you started and out of the starting blocks if you need to. Thank you all very, very much for joining this morning, but especially to you, James and Chance. I hope you all have a wonderful week ahead. Safe trip up to Manchester, James. And hope to see you all very, very soon. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Brilliant. Take care.
Are we just the three of us now?
We are just the three of us now, I think. I will just check with Alex and Laura to make sure that I have ended the session right.